The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Woldu. We've got a great show for you today, but first, I want to introduce my guest, Greg Buchanan, my co-host, radio announcer for the CPCA, as well as the Junior B Bandits Hockey Club's general manager. How are you?
Not too bad, Moses. Not too bad. Summer's here.
Oh, about time we could finally start getting flip-flop shorts and T-shirts without any concern.
Yeah.
You are the man. Speaking of which, to deal with, on the weekends, you are the new Cap television weatherman.
I do, yeah.
As well as a reporter during the week. How are you?
I'm doing great, Moses. Great to be here.
We forgot to mention your name, by the way.
We did.
Padjasek.
That is.
Can't forget that, people. I'll tell you that much. Another name we can't forget either is Cale Clegg. And many of the others. Congratulations, first and foremost, to the Lloydminster Universal Heat. 6 players drafted in the Western Hockey League Bantam Draft. Cale Clegg moving to 6th. A bit of a surprise considering how he was ranked according to the Western Elite Hockey prospects to about 3rd. And again, moved down 3 spots, but the Brandon Wheat Kings have no problem with that. They got some great picks, Nolan Patrick and 4th as well. But were you surprised that Clegg dropped all the way down to where he did?
Well, I think in the Western Hockey League Bantam Draft, there's a lot of deals done before the draft day is done. I think Prince George was in a tough spot. Nobody wants to play in Prince George. And I think they went around trying to see who would actually come. Because there's no use of drafting a player if he's not going to come your way. And there's other deals done where the team wants a goalie or a forward or a defenseman, trade me one, and now I won't pick your player that you want. And
that's what did happen
exactly.
with Brandon, with Patrick. They gave up a goalie in exchange to the Regina Pats for the condition and the word that they wouldn't pick him at number 2, and he fell to them 4th. But like again, Patrick was ranked number 2 under Western Elite's prospects, and 3 with Cale Clegg. That's got to be very impressive. The fact that they could pick up 2 of the top 3 picks later in the draft, and they set themselves up extremely well for the upcoming season, considering their 98 class is phenomenal. Not just those 2, but if you look down the line, 12 guys they picked up.
No, they've had actually a really good draft this year. And, I mean, the fact that they actually picked up Clegg was possibly one of the luckiest or one of the best backroom deals they possibly could have made.
Yeah, and you know what? You look at the last player that they brought in at that strong of a defenseman at that age was a guy by the name of Wade Redden. So ties to here as well. So.
And we know where Wade Redden is with the Boston Bruins, which we'll get to in 1 second. But first, I do want to ask Tyler Benson, number 1 overall pick, consensus. Vancouver Giants picked him, rightfully so. Looking at the numbers that he produced in the Alberta Bantam League is ridiculous. But at the WHL level, you are allowed to bring in a 15-year-old to play about 5 WHL games before you'd have to send him down, unless his team is out of the playoffs. He turned 15 in March. He'll be 16 as of March of 2014. Is there a possibility that this guy would get maybe an exemption, perhaps stick with the team, considering what he's done at the Bantam level, that he could skip perhaps midget?
That's a big step. I like to see kids develop and don't rush them into anything. You know, maybe a year of midget is definitely going to help the kid. There's not a lot of players out there that can step right in from Bantam to Major Junior.
At the same time, look how much he's accomplished though, right now in his career. I mean, he needs a next step up right now. I would love to see him up in the WHL right now.
Not saying he'll be a Connor McDavid, but
that can go either way. It can be great for the player, and it can be very harmful for the player. So for the betterment of the organization, why rush the kid in? You have other great players coming into the Vancouver Giants. I know they had a pretty bad year this past season, but you got to have confidence that they have some kids that can step up.
The Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Boston Bruins. You're just mentioning Wade Redden. You look at what Milan Lucic has done. He's been a beast for the Bruins. Last night was a great example of that, really shutting down any hope of that back end when you try to stop a guy of his size. You also look at the way Tuukka Rask played, the way they won the face-off dot, especially in their own zone. It seemed to be a complete performance by Boston in Game 3. What do you do if you're Randy Carlyle to kind of bounce back in Game 4? He did great after Game 1's loss, but now he's got to do things a little bit differently. He does have home ice, and he does get last change, but what do you guys think that Toronto is going to have to do to bounce back and even the series?
They got to be a better team, really. I mean, now that they got this little playoff hangover over with, they have home ice. They should be able to get this after a while. But Boston's just a better team, I think.
Yeah, overall, Boston's is a solid, grinding hockey team. They played Game 3 similar to how they played Game 1. You know, they shut down Toronto in their own end. They couldn't have any puck protection. They coughed up the puck again and again and again. And Boston's just solid throughout. And about Tim Thomas, remember when he left, everybody's, oh, what are the Bruins going to do? Well, Tim Thomas is probably back home watching on the couch getting a little larger and likely seeing the end of Tim Thomas.
But I want to get, Tuukka Rask. His name rarely came up, well, in terms of talks. But you look at what they've done, or what he's done. Last night, for first time in a long time, the Leafs outshot the Bruins their entire series all year. But he's stood his ground on his head at times when needed to. He seems to be that guy that could take them that next step. Because you mentioned Tim Thomas, what he did in their original Cup run a few years back. Do you see similarities, or even a better version this time around, guys?
Well, he definitely has a bit of an attitude, and that's what you need with goalie. And Tim Thomas he definitely had that. You know, if you're a teammate and you kind of pissed off Tim Thomas, well, Tim's going to let you know, and Rask does the same thing.
Yeah, and he's had that reputation even in the AHL 2 seasons ago. He wanted to be up on the big show, and he wasn't getting it, so he showed it. And I think you got to have that kind of attitude, especially as a nice young goaltender like Tuukka is.
That's going to be interesting for years to come to see how Boston is going to be, because they look quite scary now. Pittsburgh, I know they had their woes originally after Game 2 and a bit of Game 3, but it should be interesting perhaps seeing those two in a conference final. When we come back, we'll be talking about the Montreal Canadiens. Eric Greiber will be making his return to the ice tonight.